burning streets where the wild things meet. Fast lane rebel cries, we're chasing the highs. In the dark of night, our lights collide. Electric dreams, we're alive. Going for the night, we're born to roam in the field service life, where the thrill of the chase cuts like a knife. We're born to rise in the fire and the strife.
Hello, welcome to Field Service Life. I will be your host today, VR, stepping in on behalf of my buddy here, Francis J. Aiello. He is a director of field service in the critical power industry. I'm going to be interviewing him, and we're going to discuss all things field service life. So that's from the top to the bottom, and we're going to get some insights and some perspectives from someone that's been in the game for a long time. How you doing, Frank?
Doing very good, buddy. How are you?
So far so good. You started this podcast. What is the goal behind doing this podcast? For those that don't know.
So ultimately, the goal is to get some attention to this industry. I see a lot of people struggling, guys that are, or ladies and gentlemen, who are at that crossroads where they're finishing high school, they're getting ready to go into college. Some of them are going to go into the military, and they don't even know that this option exists, right? This whole lifestyle, this whole industry. And I just want to try to get it out there so more people get involved.
Okay. And in as simple terms as possible, what is field service?
So field services, instead of going into the same office every day, you work for a company that has contracts or has customers throughout, a certain area, maybe the whole country, where they dispatch a person, a technician, a talented person to go out there and do some kind of service. And so that person is going to a different location every day. Sometimes it's overnight, sometimes it's weeks at a time, traveling. It depends on what industry, what company, so on and so forth. But ultimately, either person or person to business, you're going out there and performing some kind of service for another group or person.
Is there any educational background requirements, or what types of service would not qualify for this specific line of field service?
Not necessarily, because it's such a wide range of things you could do. It's really based on what the client base needs. So, for example, I know of a company that does really good work. They go in and they clean, and I'll put the links in the plug, in the post production. But good friend of mine, his team goes out and they clean the solar panels for power data centers. I know another uh, company that just cleans data centers in general. So it's not all about education. It's also about what company you happen to join that has these service offerings to give out. Like Geico, right? Geico is mainly a insurance company. But did you know that the guy who comes and does the audits on your car, he's a field service worker, right? He gets the call, he gets probably an app on his phone that says, "Oh, I need to be here tomorrow and here at 10 o'clock and here at 2 o'clock." And he goes and he does those, audits and says, "Oh, okay, I think this is this much damage," and so on and so forth. That's
So
also
you're
a field
talking
service.
like an adjuster?
Yeah. Like the adjuster, the guy who goes out there and actually looks at the damage. Um, sometimes they bring it to a shop, sometimes he goes to your house, whatever the case may be. Safe Life Auto. They're also field service, right? They come to your location, they fix your window, whatever the case may be. So it's not always about education. It's not always about having a degree or whatever. It just means you're in a position where you're traveling and going to a job and doing it rather than you're going to the same place every day and you're helping people out, which is the part that a lot of us love.
And so it requires technical knowledge of a certain area?
Yes, I mean, again, there is also, like I said, positions where you're cleaning a data center. I guess that's also technical, right? I don't want to say anything negative about that because it's obviously you have to know how to do it properly. You have to get trained, but it's not like you have to go and get a 4-year degree to do a job like that. But same thing with my job. You don't have to have a 4-year degree to be a UPS engineer, somebody who works on uninterruptible power supplies.
Okay. Well, when I say technical, my meaning is that it's not a simple process. There's multiple layers and you have to get every layer correct. It's not really a reference to the educational background. It's just that there's some form of training required in order to get the job done. Is that my
Yeah,
understanding correct?
100%. 100%. Although car washer, right? So I guess you could say that's technical too, right? You have mobile car wash. That's also a field service kind of job. But yeah, I mean, you have to have a specialized set of skills. Otherwise, why are people going to pay you to do it?
Okay. And then when you say field service, is this more of an entrepreneur or is this more of like a 9 to 5 employee? Like, how would you categorize someone in this area?
It can be either. So you can put yourself as the guy who is looking for clients on his own, or even is willing to work for other companies looking to pay him like 1099 to go out and do these jobs, or you can go to work for somebody and be an employee of a major conglomerate like Schneider Electric, where they have fingers in so many pots and so many different UPS, STS, ATS, and then they send people out, breakers, and then those people go and do the work and they collect their paycheck.
Okay. And so, what is the personality or the background of someone that typically takes on this type of work?
I would say people who don't want to be stuck in one place every day, going to that same office, dealing with the office politics, where you can step away and say, okay, I'm gonna go somewhere different every day. I'm gonna be a rambling man. I've got the wanderlust. I want to go somewhere different every day. I don't want to get bored and stuck in the same place.
Would you say field service in general has no office politics?
It's so much different, to be honest. I took my first office job after being in field service for a few years, and I didn't like it. I think after 6 months, I tapped out and went back into the field, and it wasn't until much later in my life where I moved into an office job and I was actually happy.
And what do you think people typically misunderstand about field service work, or maybe it's misrepresented when people think of it?
For sure. So I think a lot of people think that those technicians only get paid when they're dispatched. If you are an entrepreneur, obviously that's going to be the case. But if you're working for a major company, it's really hard to hire someone and say, hey, we're going to keep you, we're only going to pay you when you go out, but we need you to be available to go out whenever. So they're usually going to have to pay you a salary. And so a lot of these positions are either salary capped out or salary plus overtime. And then there's also usually like a vehicle allowance or a vehicle that's provided so that they can get to and from the jobs. So yeah, people don't understand that that's all part of the same comp package, right? They just assume, oh, well, if I go work there, what if they only have 2 days worth of work for me? Am I only going to get paid for 2 days? They don't stay and listen to the whole story that no, you'll get paid your whole salary whether or not you even get dispatched.
Okay, so you would say, what about in a situation where there's sales involved? Do any of the field service people sell things on the road? Is there commission structure in any of the income?
Yeah, I would say there's probably positions that are field service salesmen as a whole unit, but the ones that are more technical, like I was, and like many of the guys that I work with, they are what's considered a trusted advisor. So they're not selling per se, but they're going out there and saying, "Hey, your unit is great, but that one over there is starting to break down. You maybe have another year out of it. You should start budgeting for next year." And they're not trying to do that to make money. They're doing it because one, they don't want to get called at 2 in the morning when it fails, right? So it motivates them that way. But at the other point of it is, yeah, some of these companies do have a commission structure or even a referral structure where it's not like percentage based, but it's like, hey, if you submit this referral, you'll get X amount of dollars. And it works out good, right? Because the client is getting protected. They don't want to break down in the middle of the night either, because a lot of these places, their infrastructure generates so much money that if it goes down, they're actually losing. So to invest in, an upgrade or a replacement prior to the failure is actually more cost effective. So yeah, they are kind of sales, quasi, more like advisors.
Okay. And what made you get into this specific line of work?
So for me, I was just getting out of the military, and when I was, my last 6 months out, I was telling my chief that this was the plan. I was in the Navy. And they said, all right, there's this class called TAP class. I don't know what the acronym stands for, honestly, something about transitioning out of the military, but I highly recommend it if you are in the military to take the TAP class because it was amazing. Basically, they bring you all into like this big room and they have all these different professionals come out to talk to you. They brought out like an exec or like a high level guy from Men's Warehouse uh, like a woman's clothing outlet. I don't remember what it was. And they brought in like a recruiter to talk to you about resume writing. They had a consultant come in to talk to you about like how to dress, how to behave, how to talk, how to write your resume, how to not sound like a military person, how to take those military skills and transition them into writing that civilians would understand so that when you put together your resume and you show up, you don't sound like, aye, sir. You sound more civilian and get the job. So I went to this class. I got a lot out of it. I really appreciated it. And I got in contact with a couple of recruiters and headhunters, as they call them, and gave them my resume. Um, Took a bunch of tests for a different bunch of different companies and had offers on the table, and most of them were field service.
Okay, did you have a mentor in this? Did someone kind of walk you through it?
Not during the process of getting in. It it wasn't until many many years later where I would get a mentor on the job that would help me level up essentially.
And that mentor, do you remember anything impactful that he taught you or something about the specific job that stays with you till today?
I can speak to that on several mentors that I've had over the years. So when I first got out of the military, my first job was MGE, and I was under Stephen Jones, great leader, smart guy. He mostly, since I was a technician, he mostly taught me technical stuff. So he improved my technical game a lot on the electrical end and the troubleshooting end. But then when I transitioned to Pillar, an older gentleman named George Fedrizzi, he really got the mechanical side and, doing bearing changes and replacing stuff on these, multi-ton machines. And you also have to understand rigging and lifting and doing it safely. So without him, I would have never made that end of it, right? Because I already had the electrical, I already had the training from the military, I had the mentor when I was at MGE, but him there put it all together. But then, as far as leadership, the first one that comes to mind would be Todd Tereshko. He was the director of service at Pillar, and
What's
he
something
was the
that
one
he
that taught
told
me.
you? What was something like what was one like maybe line or quote or something that he gave you that you kind of remember?
So I can't think of a quote, but I remember going to a job and I said this was unsafe. This customer wanted us to do this job without opening a breaker. He wanted us to just disconnect the wire. And I'm like, well, that's what a breaker's for. Like, I'm not just going to go over and unbolt the wire on a live thing and become a human breaker. And so I called him and he was like, nope, we're not doing that. He put the stop on it. And he's like, the importance of safety for my people is more important. And that's maybe the quote, right? That that got me. And I was like, you know what? That's if I'm ever in that position, that's the way I'm going to be, right? Because I'm not going to compromise people's safety for the company's profits.
So safety is the red line basically. Anything that they ask you to do that's unsafe, you're not doing it.
100%. But
Okay. And
then,
then do you get like safety training? Like
oh,
this is
absolutely.
okay.
In all positions, they harp on safety and harp on safety, but over the years, there has been people who are willing to go around it. But before we get onto that, I just wanted to say then the next two leaders that really spent a lot of time and I learned so much from, and I'm still in touch with, even though I no longer work for them. Cody Pike and Bill Hoyer. Both of those gentlemen, I still call them from time to time when I have questions. You know, um,
And
Great
how do you
people,
think they've impacted you?
so much. Like I was here and I went to like here. It was just great to have somebody that actually cared, that took the time, still takes the time. Right? I don't work for them. There's no reason for them to take my call other than they're good people. We have a good rapport, and this industry is so small. We have to help each other.
How would you say that their relationship with you has made you better? Like, what have they improved about your abilities?
So at the time when I met them in my career, I was already past the point where, and I'm gonna say it's gonna sound arrogant, but it's not. Like it wasn't that I needed more technical guidance, right? Like I already passed that. The technical part was gone. I was already an office worker. I was already no longer doing that. And even though I had worked in an office for 2 years as a manager up until that point, before I left that other company, I had the training that I received that I paid for myself to become a better manager. And that's it. I had no mentorship. But then when I came over to Quality Uptime, I had leadership mentorship. And those guys, they took the time. They still do. Like I said, I still call them when I have questions. Good people. And yeah, they
And
taught me about how to deal with some of these situations where you maybe have like a squabble between guys on your team, or when you have a really critical situation with the customer, how's the best way to go about it. um, yeah, just good lessons, good
so most
lessons.
of your mentorship came on the office side, not in the actual field service side.
Well, like I said earlier on in my career when I was here, I had the training from George Fedrizzi. Oh, and Brian Melville, another good mentor. He's probably one of the smartest technicians. He was actually product support when I got there. He was the guy you called when you couldn't figure it out. And being that I was lucky, I lived close enough to the office in Middletown, New York, where I can go out there. So if I didn't have anything going on in the field, or if they had a project going on there, I can go out there. And having exposure to product support and specifically Brian, I could ask him questions. We can chat, and I could kind of pick his brain. And although he's a bit of a goofball, and he likes to joke around a lot, he's really smart. He might tease you a bit, but he'll get you there.
Okay. And so walk me through like a day in the life of someone that does field service. Like say what does their workday look like? When does it start? When does it end? What do they do in between?
Okay, so that's one of the best parts of field service. I'm just going to throw this out there because I love EnerSys. They've always been good to us. Um, Field service life is the best and worst part of being in field service is you go home when the job's done. And what I mean by that is if you work in an office, right, and you're a 9 to 5 employer, or 8:30 to 5, whatever, you're there from beginning to the end, regardless. If you finish all your work and you're twiddling your thumbs and there's literally nothing else you can do, even if you think your hardest to try to figure out what else you can do, you're still stuck there. So with field service, as soon as you finish the job, you're out of there, right? However, that can also come to bite you the other side because the job might be increasingly more difficult. Things might spiral out of control and go downhill, and then you end up having to go to the grocery store or the clothing store to buy more clothes so you can stay there, and go to the laundromat to wash your clothes so you can stay there longer and longer until you get the job done. Um, but
So the workday, you wake up, what happens? You get a call from
yeah,
dispatch or like
so usually you have at least a week, maybe two. It all depends on how good the company is and how well organized their management team is. But basically, there's usually some kind of app. And this I've been in this industry so long. It was before apps. You'd have somebody just call you, and you'd write it down on your calendar and say, okay, this is where I have to be this day. This is where I have to be this day. And so you have a scheduler person who does all the calls, sends all the emails back and forth to the customer to confirm where you need to be. They let the technicians know. So you look at your schedule, you say, okay, I got to be here the next day. Now I have to figure out how long it's going to take me to get there, right? Because it might be somewhere I've never been. It might be a place I've been multiple times, but summertime might be different than wintertime, right? It's not like you're commuting to the same office. So you have to figure out what's the traffic going to be like. Is there any special events? Like if you're going to somewhere around the football stadium on a Sunday, you might have to think, oh, is there a game? I might have to leave an extra hour and a half early. Little tricks of the field service industry. But anyway, you figure out where you have to go, you make all the plans, and back in the day, you had to print out your map quest or chart it on a map, not like today
okay.
with the handy dandy GPS. And yeah, so you show up, so you go to bed in time to make sure you have plenty of time to get up and get dressed and shower and go over to that job. And then you get there
Is
And
the start time
typically
pretty consistent, or is the start time fluctuate? Like it is sometimes 7 in the morning, sometimes 10.
wildly fluctuates, right? Because you have some customers who, like banking facilities, for example, they might say, we don't do anything until during banking hours. So you might have to show up there in the morning before banking hours to make a change of the breaker status. And then you have to go home and come back after banking hours to do the work. So you have a big enough window to get the work done before you can change the breaker status again before the next banking day. Some customers only want to do things on a Friday night, so you have the whole weekend in case things go wrong, to get everything back into operation before Monday morning. For example, a production company like maybe that makes a product, but they only do production Monday through Friday. So it really all depends on the needs of the customer. They're going to determine when you show up, how long you stay. Are we trying to space it out over the course of a week, or are we trying to get a week's worth of work done in 2 days with a team of five, or whatever the case may be?
Now, when you're going in there, like, what do you do for lunch? Like, do you make friends with the people there? Do you pre-plan your meals out? I mean, if you're going to new places every time, I'm sure you don't have a regular lunch spot.
Okay, so I'm sure this is going to vary a lot between individual, and as an individual myself, it varied a lot just because of my lifestyle. As you know, I used to be a competitive athlete, so during those times, I would usually just bring like a protein shake and maybe a protein bar, like maybe a Ziploc bag full of mixed nuts and trail mix, and a big bottle of water. But yes, to the other part of your questions, I always try to make friends with the people because I always found that if you go there and you just act like it's a job and you don't care, you don't want to know them, whatever, they're going to treat you like that's who you are. You're just the guy who came here to do this job. But if you go there and you're like personable, you're friendly, you get to know people, they're going to treat you like a person. And that's going to make your day more enjoyable. And then you network, right? So maybe now, 10 years from now, that might be the person that offers you your dream job. Or maybe they need a job. Like you get to know people, things go a lot smoother, life's a lot happier. Um, it's just like if you were, like when you go on an Uber or a cab, the person chats with you. I prefer that, right? I obviously if I'm super busy and I'm on a call, I can't, but I prefer to like be friendly with people and get to know people. It's just part of my personality. Um, but yeah, I would always prefer to do it that way and go to lunch with them, if they're available. Spread a little goodwill from the company. It always bodes well for business in the future as well.
And okay, so what would you say is one personal sacrifice you've made for this career that most people outside wouldn't understand?
So a lot of people in this industry have, just like in the military, it's in the jobs where you travel a lot, it can be hard on a family, it can be hard on a marriage. Um, thank God my wife has always been great, and it takes a special wife to be with somebody who spends 130 something days a year in a hotel. But the thing that you don't realize is with that no consistency in your life, not knowing when you're coming home, not knowing when you're sleeping out, if you have personal goals, it can get in the way and make them more challenging. For example, for me, I was doing the jiu-jitsu fighting and I was fighting MMA. And before I got promoted to supervisor, I had a lot more less time traveling because you're not needed as much when you're a junior tech versus a senior tech and a supervisor. They want you to fly out to different places, and then you're trying to train, you're trying to get ready, you're trying to eat healthy, but now you're being forced to, you know, find food on the go, um, not be at your gym, go to different places where you don't know anybody. And some people are too shy to even, like me, I would travel. They'd send me to California. Okay, I'm going to find a gym in California. I'm going to bring my jujitsu gi and get it sweaty and wash it at the hotel, and then fold it and dry it and bring it home and whatever. But it would have been a lot easier just to go there and do the job like most people. Um,
Gotcha. Okay, and so like someone getting into the industry, what would you say is the typical compensation structure? What can someone expect in the terms of like a starting salary and like what are the what are the gradients for them to improve in their career and then get to the point where maybe they can be in management or in the office, or maybe talk about how you got into management from the field service side.
Okay. So I can't talk to specific pay because the industry varies so much, right? Like a guy who works on controls might make more than somebody who works on an ATS, or a generator guy might make a lot more than a guy who works on air conditions. I don't know specifically, right? Because I've only been in my niche, UPS and controls and STS. But I will
And that's
say,
like power sources when you say those.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
uninterruptible power supply. That's something where if you lose power, the device gives power to the end result, to the load, either through a battery or mechanical battery or whatever. And then a switchgear is going to be the device or an STS, which can transfer to another source. So let's say the line utility loses power, the UPS continues powering load. It senses that it got too low. It says, all right, we need to do something, start a generator, or maybe there's a second utility company, right, that's also powering, that didn't lose power, or whatever the case may be. Bring that secondary source over, and now we continue on powering the load. Nobody ever saw a blip. The, you know, Facebook, YouTube, Zoom, everybody who's got servers, that's we're all depending on to keep those servers up. Walmart, Chase Bank, they're all still getting power and never see a blip when power goes away. So yeah, in any of those positions, the pay range is going to be pretty market standard, right? So depending on what year you're getting in and what most people are making in the economy, it's going to be like within this much between the different organizations. Where it's going to vary is going to be the different perks of the job. So, whereas some companies will give you a company vehicle, and it might be a really nice company vehicle, and you're happy to have that in your driveway, right? Or some companies might give you a vehicle allowance, and then a miles reimbursement. So you end up being able to pick whatever car you want, and then depending on your seniority, you get a really you get a little bit more, a little bit less, so you can drive around in a nicer car. Some companies might give you a weird van that looks horrible in your driveway with letters on it or whatever. So, you gotta look around and see what works best for you, because some people might have an HOA where they can't even have that in their driveway, right? So that's going to kind of determine if you're looking to be in that field, in that industry. Do I go to this company here, or this company here, or this company here, right? What are the different perks? Some companies might give you tools, right, as part of the perk package, and other companies might say, okay,
Tools to keep?
yeah, some of them give you the tools to keep. So if you stay with the company for X amount of years or a year or whatever, you get to keep them. Some might say no, you give them back when you leave. Um, you always get a laptop, you always get a cell phone, because everyone's gonna have to get a hold of you. You're gonna have to do service reports. Which brings me to the next part of your question. How does somebody in this industry move up? So there's many different pathways, right? You can go just junior tech, regular tech, senior tech, supervisor, manager, director, VP, whatever, keep going up the chain. Or you could say, okay, I'm maybe super technical, but I'm not good with people. I'm going to go from tech to senior tech to tech support, right? Or maybe you're really good at sales. So you go from tech to senior tech to account manager, or inside sales, or outside sales. So you go that route. Um, some people go project manager, right? So instead of managing people, they manage projects. So there's a whole lot of ways to go, but basically, you have to master your craft firstly, right? Understand everything about this product that you work on, regardless if you're trying to be the product support or whatever, because you might peak out at a certain point, but at least you have that knowledge. So when you go over to project management, or you go over to management, you can still manage those projects and manage those people, because you know what the end result is supposed to be, because you know how it's supposed to work and how it's supposed to function.
Do most
But
managers work in field service first, or they just go straight to manager?
in this industry, they usually have to work in the industry first, because understanding what are the expectations and what are the customers' expectations and what's reasonable versus what's not reasonable. You have to have been there, in my opinion, at least. And many of the companies that I've dealt with and worked for, they've all had the people who ran the service department worked in this kind of industry, or they didn't last long when they came because it's kind of chaotic. Long hours, 24/7 on call. Um, and there's a rotation for the technicians, but the managers kind of always have to be there to answer the questions, direct the people where they need to go, bill the customers or invoice or quote or whatever the case may be. So there's always going to be that attachment from the back office to the field. But how do you get there? How do you get that promotion? How do you move up to management? You can't just only focus on the work in the field. One, you have to make sure your field service reports are immaculate because your manager is judging your work based on feedback from the customers, but he's also looking at your field reports every day to see what you're writing versus what the next guy's writing. So are you just doing the bare minimum, or are you really going out there and trying to show them like, oh yeah, this is what happened? You're trying to teach the customer. I had a thing that I wrote. I did an article on it. A field service report should be one to cover yourself from any kind of things, incidents that might happen in the future, right? Oh, I saw this problem that may arise. So now when that problem does arise, you're covered. Try to generate revenue for the company by saying, okay, look, these batteries are getting old. It's time to replace them. Now you're also protecting the customer, but you're also generating more revenue. Um, Educate the customer, right? Because a lot of times the product is something that they know very little about. And if they don't understand, like at least the basic level, they're not going to know what you're trying to even tell them. So use it to educate, um, and use it to tell the story of what you did, how you did it, why you did it, and lastly, what are the next steps? What's the follow up, if any? So
Okay.
taking that approach, getting all that stuff together, and then also becoming learning what to say in front of the customer, what not to say in front of the customer, how to manage your time, how to learn to use all the different aspects of a computer, right? Word, Office, Excel, because side projects are going to come up where you need to do X, Y, and Z. And if you can't do all that stuff, you can't really be in management, right? Because, and then being a leader, not just, and a lot of technicians, they start off just, and I'm sorry, I know I'm going on a monologue here, but you start off, you're just going to one job and you're taking care of one thing and you're maybe starting up a piece of equipment, but by the time you're a senior tech, you might be doing like a 16 module 18 module startup where all the pieces are interconnected. They all have to be level 4 tested with third parties, with electricians and vendors and whoever else is on site, and it all has to be coordinated together. And you need someone who's senior who can get along with all these people, coordinate, not argue with them, and say, "Hey, we need to get in there. Can you guys do this while we do that?" And try to make it work. So it kind of reads it into you.
Now, do you think that the supervisors that are there, they have to either fire or be moved, either get fired or get moved up in order for you to get the opportunity? And how would you say you actually get the chance at leadership when you're kind of working solo in the field?
So not necessarily, because this industry is very small, but it's constantly growing. So like you might have one manager who's in charge of half the country, right? But then as the company grows, you have more and more technicians working, and it's just too many for one manager to manage. So they have to move somebody else up. And it's
Right.
really hard, like I said before, to bring somebody else in from the outside. So more opportunities arise. And then when you start bringing in some junior level guys, right? Somebody's got to train them. So you need a trainer. Somebody's got to be there to give them support when they can't figure it out. So someone's got to be there to support them. Somebody's got to be there to schedule them. Somebody's got to be there to manage these big projects when it's too many moving pieces for a technician to run the job and do the technical work, but also, oh, are these parts going to be here on time? Um, you know, are they going to have power for us on this day, or whatever the case may be? So as the company grows and expands, positions are going to open up around it.
Gotcha. Okay. And so, like, as far as finances, would you say there's a major difference between office and field work?
interesting. So when I first got into management and I promoted that same year, I actually made a little bit less money, and that's because when I was in the field, I was also getting overtime. So between and a lot of these companies they pay what they call portal to portal, meaning when you leave your house, your clock starts. So you leave your house, you go to the job, you do the job, and you drive back, and all that's billable time. And then even if you have to do your service report after, that might be billable time too, depending on company policies. So when I was there in the field in my last year, I did so many times traveling. Like I would leave on a Monday super early, like 5 in the morning, 4:30 in the morning, drive down from Pennsylvania to Virginia, work all day Monday, work all day Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then Friday work, till like 2, 3 o'clock and then drive back. So at the end of the week, I'm making like 50, 55 hours, on top of the service reports, maybe 57 hours, like an extra two. And, doing this and then also all your expenses when you're out in the field, like if you're staying overnight, a lot of companies either do like per diem or meal reimbursement. So you're getting the money for the tax-free meals for all these nights out. And then on top of that, if you're smart, you're getting your credit card miles or your credit card hotel points, and you end up a platinum or diamond elite member of some hotel chain. And you have all these credit card points for you can spend on Christmas gifts and free vacations at the end of the year. So when
So
I moved into management,
you always use personal cards. You don't use corporate credit cards for anything.
right, which is funny because I remember when I first got into the field, guys were complaining because somebody had in the company I worked for, somebody had used the company card and they bought themselves a TV and a whole bunch of other stuff and they got fired and then they like took it away from everybody and everybody was complaining and I'm like, why are you complaining? I'd rather use my own card and get the points, you know? One, I'm
Is that
establishing my
company
credit.
specific or is that
Yeah,
something that
it's company specific because you always have somebody in upper management who is going to make the call, right? Either yeah, we're going to give them corporate Amex, we're going to give them this or that, or they're going to use their own card and get reimbursement. And that person might move on or move up, and then the next person might change it or keep it the same. There's really no telling.
Gotcha, okay. And what is some of the craziest stuff that you've seen while in the field?
Ooh. Okay, so when we say in the field, are we talking about like on the job or like on the way to the job or? Well, I got stories for
Anything,
days.
all of the above.
Okay, I'll tell you this one's hysterical. So, as I said, back in the day, we didn't have like I didn't have GPS. It was MapQuest, right? And I had a flip phone. Like this was before smartphones. So I've got my MapQuest. It's my first time going to. I had a Canadian work visa. Oh, side story. They sent me to the border to get my Canadian work visa with all the paperwork prepared by the company lawyer. And I get there and I'm at the border and it's Saturday night or Sunday night because I had to work Monday morning. And a group of like teenagers were crossing the border and they had like alcohol or something and they weren't supposed to. And they really worked up the agent there. And he was really upset, right? Dealing with these kids. And then so I was next. So he already was just pissed. So here I am with my paperwork. I'm applying for citizenship, not citizenship, but I'm applying for my visa to work in Canada. And he's telling me, well, why can't a Canadian do this job? I'm like, well, eventually they can. Like, I'm going out there to work with some of the locals, and we're gonna hopefully get some of them trained up while I'm out there, and yada yada yada. And so, long story short, they denied me. So here I am. It's like 11 o'clock. I was just an hour from my hotel where I was going, and had turned around, sat in the hotel. But yeah, it was cool because the next day, while the lawyer was working on everything, I spent the day at Niagara Falls on my mountain bike because I happened to put it in my van. But that was
Oh,
a
wow.
fun story. But the problem is, since I got rejected, every time I went into Canada after that, I got searched. One time they even put me in a little room, no windows, just left me in there. They searched my van and made me feel like a criminal every time, every single time. Um, Another time it was right after 9/11. I was working and I had a clutch in this van. It was like a 400 pound, 300 pound, like clutch with a hub on it, and it looked like a big pipe bomb, I guess, right? Because here this thing is like ratchet strapped to the back of my van, and I'm crossing the tunnel into New York City. And next thing I know, they're checking the talking to me. And they're like, "Where you going?" I'm like, "Manhattan." And then they knock on my window, and then the guy's yanking me out of the car, and they're pointing guns at me, and they're like, "What is it?" I'm like, "What?" I was like, "Oh, it's a clutch. It's a clutch." Like they thought I had a bomb in the back of my van,
Oh my
and I was
God.
going to take out the tunnel. So that was pretty crazy. But back to Canada. When I finally got into Canada the first time, I was in Gatineau with my MapQuest, and I pull over, and I'm like trying to figure out where I am with my MapQuest, looking at the thing. So I call my wife, and as I'm on the phone with my wife, this lady knocks on my window and asks me if I want a date. And I'm like, no, thank you. And I close my window, and apparently it's they do that over there where I was. So yeah, weird.
They okay. So t tell us about a customer situation that was totally out of your hands, and how did you handle it?
Oh, I got a perfect one. So there was a site in Manhattan where they had a unit that kicked offline. For whatever reason, it ended up being a battery was so old. We had been telling them to replace these batteries for many years, and they were like 7 years old. So they were so bad that when they died or however it happened, it also made the charger fail. So we had to replace the charger, whatever. But these units had never been powered off. Like they never wanted to do maintenance properly on them. So we never completely shut the system down. And in the case of this system, it was a two modules in parallel. The only way to turn them both on was for them both to go to bypass and then them both to be turned online at the same time. Then they can go into sync and turn on. If one of them is off, it can't turn back on because the phase angle between it coming online and the transformer that feeds it, it would trip the breaker. Now it shouldn't trip the breaker, but it was tripping the breaker. And the reason for this is they never did a coordination study. Coordination study is when they say basically an engineering company comes in and they say, okay, these different breakers all are going to have to trip at different times depending on how much current comes through them. I don't want to get too into the weeds here, but it's a service that we didn't provide. We told them that they needed it's like requirement from the I guess when you commission the site, it has to be done. But for whatever reason, they didn't do it. They got around it. And since they never did it, we couldn't turn the second unit on without this breaker tripping. So the only option was to put them both at the bypass, bring them both online. But they refused. They did not want to put their customer on bypass. Their customer being they were a data center company, so their customer being whoever was renting the servers from them. So they made this big thing like we had the fuses that cleared. They wanted us to X-ray the fuses. Like, what is that going to prove? Yeah, the fuse failed because the rectifier failed because the batteries were, you know, they're supposed to be replaced 4.5, 5 years. You let them go for almost 7, 6.5, whatever, and it
Right.
caused too much current. And that's what happens. They made conference calls so long all day, tying up like almost the whole department to the point where they were like, all right, look, this is done. Like, we can't be on these conference calls all day. We understand that you're unhappy, but you guys didn't get the coordination study done during commissioning. We have the engineer of record saying it. It's on our documents that we provided you during the commissioning. Like, there's literally nothing else we can do. And while all this was going on between my company and their company, all these conference calls, I was the guy there on site. And there was this one gentleman who was not very gentlemanlike. He was literally screaming in my face at one point. And
Why?
so I was his I was the only person he had there to take his vent his frustration out on. And so he was venting and yelling at me, and I was saying, look, I'm really sorry. This is the way it is. Like I said, they provided you all the documentation. We just can't do it any other way. Well, we want you here. You're gonna stay here until this is figured out. So I felt basically like a prisoner at this point. And so okay, stayed there. I got some space for him. I called my manager. I told him what was going on. Long story short, eventually turns out that not only was this whole situation bad, but their maintenance agreement had already expired, and they had sent us an altered one that showed they were still under maintenance before we even went to that service call.
So it
So
was a fake agreement that they gave you?
yeah, so our agreement like expired, let's say a month before, and when they called in the middle of the night to even get me out there for this whole situation, they told whoever they talked to on the phone, whether it was my manager or whoever at the time, because I was a technician at this point, that it was still under the agreement and he didn't have access to everything. Because again, this was the Stone Age, right? It was like 18, 19 years ago. We didn't have the cloud, we didn't have access like we have now. So they sent me out there, and then he had sent them a PDF showing that we were still under the agreement, but he had altered it. So he got terminated by his company, and that whole situation was way out of control. So yeah, probably
I
the
mean, it
worst.
sounds that sounds like fraud if you ask me.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I guess they terminated him, so they didn't have liability. I don't know what all went into that, but essentially, I got paid for my overtime. I was, you know, my boss was happy the way I handled the situation under the circumstances, and we lived another day. Field service life.
So, in your experience, what has been the most technically demanding job and what made it such a beast?
Okay, so at Pillar Power Systems, they had a one of their products was a motor and a generator that were on this pedestal on like a little track on this big metal bracket, and it was heavy, right? Like really heavy. And in between them there was a clutch so that the motor could turn the generator, and when the power went away, the generator can turn the motor, right? So there's nothing to be turned on or turned off because they're always connected. So you have like when you don't do it with the clutch, it's a what they call electrically coupled, where power goes away, you have an electric battery that continues to run and powers it. Um, but when you have it mechanically coupled, you don't even have that little gap in between of a couple of seconds. It's like instantaneously, right? So anyway, this clutch, um, it's way too heavy to pick up, right? You have to start the job, you have to get there, you have to build a gantry over and in between. And this is in a tight room where you can barely fit a gantry. So you have to like climb up on stuff and try to fit the T bar in between and put this thing together. And then you have to have a chain fall, and you have to then remember that whole base that I told you this thing sits on? That base isn't even
Right.
long enough. So you have to bring an extender, and you have to like drill holes and bolt on an extender and try to make it level so that when you do disconnect this clutch, you have to pick up this multi-ton machine rather, put it on skates, push it back with hydraulics, and you're unbolting bolts that are like this big, and then they all have
How
to
are
be
you
torqued
picking it
after.
up?
So we had hydraulic presses, we had the gantry. So all right. So this whole motor on top of this pedestal had like these holes in it here and here in the built into the steel, and you had this big steel rod that went through, and you put these hydraulic lifts like bottle jacks that would lift up on this bar, which would lift up the whole device, and then you lift one side, you put the skates underneath it, which is basically like a hard piece of metal with some steel rollers underneath it, and then you do the same thing on the other side, and then after you unbolted everything, you could put a hydraulic press in between the two machines and press them out. And as they expand, they push the machines apart. And if you go too far to one side or the other, this whole machine drops and that's it. Show's over. Um, and separating all this equipment, you also had to blow torch certain parts to get the heat to expand so that you can separate them. You had to, and it's all super technical. The clearances had to be within a certain threshold. You had a digital meter that would like press on it and then you'd spin it around and you have to make sure that while it rotated, it didn't come out of alignment for X amount of uh, millimeters. It was a lot. It was a lot. It took a couple of days to do it. 2.5 to 3 days if you had a really, really good team. Some teams took a whole week. Um, just a tough, tough job in general. And then putting it back together, same thing. You have to heat components up, put them in place, let them cool, go to lunch, come back. Hopefully, by that time, it's cool enough to touch so you can start putting bolts in it and then pushing it all back together or pulling it all back together with a come along, making and then that whole time when you're doing that, when you finally get down to the bearings and you're getting down to like the little housings for the bearings, you have to fill it with just the right amount of grease. And if anything was off, like a centimeter or millimeter, that'll be it. The thing will fail. If not instantly, it could fail within a couple of days if it wasn't done properly. Or it could be done halfway decently and fail in a year and a half instead of lasting for, the intended lasting time. So a lot of pressure, a lot of money, right? A lot of hours, a large crew. So somebody in charge of that job is running a crew of, 4 guys, 3 guys, coordinating, pushing this thing back, pulling it together when you're on narrow angle irons. A lot of tools that are required. If something's missing, you run into the hardware store. That's adding time.
Would you say
Just a
that that
beast.
was one of the most sketchy or dangerous jobs you had?
So it's up there. Sketchy or dangerous, I would say, would be worse earlier on in my career before the safety standards came out and were as rough. We used to do things like things that we now do with the computer for commissioning purposes, such as um, even for basic maintenance. I remember when I first got into the industry, I won't say the company name, during a semi-annual maintenance, instead of having to just take the readings off the display. They wanted you to take the panels off the unit while it's live, metal panels, and then take measurements on the units while it's running, and then put these metal panels back on. If you
That
slipped
doesn't
with that
seem
metal
safe.
panel, yeah, no. Nowadays, that would be laughable. Nobody's doing that. But back then, they wanted that done. That was part of what the requirements were in this industry. And I'd say doing that is more unsafe than this whole thing lifting these things up and blow torching things to you know ridiculous amounts and then pressing them on with 20 tons of force to press them into position. You know, uh,
So, what's like the worst injury you've seen someone sustain in your job?
ooh, okay, I didn't see it, but I was on site where somebody died. Um, wasn't one of our
At
guys,
work?
thankfully. Yeah, it was on a construction site. Um, the GC was there. This guy was doing some work. He was connecting the bus work between different rooms, and I guess the lockout wasn't there, and he just blew up. That was it. I didn't see it, but I was there. I was there for the safety stand down the next day, or for the rest of the day, and they shut down the site. Um, I've seen someone fall off a scaffolding and land on a rebar, came through his hip here. Um,
Terrible.
I seen somebody blow his hands up doing battery work. He was connecting 40 batteries in series, but then he took 20 of them and tied them back to onto themselves instead of to the next tier up, and that blew up. His hands were good thing that job. He was already out of hospital, so he didn't have to go far. Um,
Yes, there's some perks to the job.
right. Oh, what else? What else? Um, Seen a guy get shocked, but you don't really know the damage because it was on the inside. He went to the hospital. And I saw some dumb things too, like a guy stood up into a piece of metal and it just went into his head and he just bled all over. It probably wasn't a really bad injury, but it looked really bad because he was just covered in blood, like you wouldn't believe. But I mean, head wounds like that bleed a lot. Um, and then car accidents. One of the parts of this job that people don't understand is you're actually more likely to get hurt on the way or on the way home because the hours and just being on the road is dangerous.
Have you ever miscalculated your travel and then had a situation where you were essentially stranded?
Yeah, almost. So I one of my this back at one of the companies I worked for, the coordinator was supposed to do the travel arrangements. The policy changed eventually, but so I was showing up to Canada and my hope there was no hotel booked for me. So I started making calls again, flip phone, right? So didn't really have the internet, so I had to just like ask the lobby for do you have the number of any hotels in the area? And they let me use their business center. And I went on the computer and got a bunch of numbers and called around and I eventually found something. It was probably 30 minutes away. So after I just drove like 11 miles from Staten Island, New York to you know, Gatineau, New Canada. I had to then drive back, after being harassed by the border agents and the whole shebang and going through customs because I was bringing parts and all that stuff, having to drive like another 40 minutes to find a hotel, only to get like, 3 hours of sleep to go back to the job site because I was planning on getting there at 11 and going right to bed instead of this whole, this whole
And
situation.
when you were stranded, I mean, did they still pay you at least?
Yeah, yeah, I still got paid my hourly rate, so it is what it is. I mean, you until you're home, being whether that be your house, your hotel, whatever, you're still traveling, and travel time is same as work time
Okay.
at that company
And
anyway.
gotcha. Okay. So now I guess you moved over to a different role now than what you used to be, right? What made you decide it was time to pivot from your existing position and from your view, where does a company get the most value out of someone like you or like someone in the field?
Gotcha. So, um, you know, about 17 years in the field, learning the craft, mastering the craft. Then at what point are you just another really good technician, right? And yeah, it is a small industry and they are in need of really good technicians, but at what point if you pivot into like a management role, now you're in a position where you can try to build other technicians to be a better technician. You can give them the guidance and kind of the push in that direction so that they become, instead of just being the guy who goes and gets his bare minimum done and goes home at the end of the day, you can try to inspire him, try to tell your story, try to explain to him, like, I was just like you. You can be just like me. Just do these things and improve. Also, once you're in management, you can kind of like get involved in different training programs and change the way things are going with training. Some companies want to keep it all in house, but you can, kind of push up and say, hey, look, we should maybe also bring in some third party stuff. We should also maybe bring in an expert that can help us out. Or, I'd be happy to get involved and help build a curriculum too. Um, so I think the best value a company can get out of an employee that's made that point in their career where they've done it and they're at that level and they also have the chops to be a manager is to do kind of both, right? Be the guy in the office, be there to train the guys, be there to show them the way, be there to help them achieve the next level, be the mentor that they need, and at the same time, if things go south in the field and they need that level of technician and they don't have anybody at the moment, you could still go out there, right? So you're still that like last ace in the hole backup at the same time.
Do you think in your experience, the supervisors that have the technical experience tend to go out to the field as a last resort? Do you see that happening a lot?
Hit and miss. Some guys, they get up there and then they say, you know what? Nah, I'm done. I did my time. It's somebody else's turn now. But I never thought of it like that. I was happy to say I did it. I'm here. I made management, but at the same time, when I'm going to give my guys a chance because I don't want to cut their heels, right? I want them to learn, but at the same time, if they're hacking at the bit and the customer needs to be up, I can't just let them suffer, right? I'm going to go down there and help. And if I can go down there and show them my process, show them what I was doing, um, how did I attack this process and get it fixed? Maybe now the next time they'll be like, oh, okay, I'll do it this way, and then they'll start to grow and they'll start to learn, and then eventually they won't need it anymore.
Gotcha. Okay. Have you ever mentored anybody in your industry?
Absolutely. Absolutely. From the minute I became a manager, even when I was a supervisor, when I was a supervisor at Pillar, the newest guy that came on was Franklin Yarrick, and great guy. I want to interview him as well. But he now works for another company, and he, being that he had someone there to mentor him, he improved so fast. Like he became a senior tech in I think like five years, which is great. From coming in from just straight out of the military to senior tech, that usually takes people a long time. 10, 15, some people never make it to senior tech. There's plenty of guys that are in these companies that work as a regular level technician their whole career, you know? So to see that I had that improvement on him and now he transcended that position and took on another one. Now he's in like a leadership role. Um, and that was the first one when I was just a supervisor. And when I became a manager, I had a team of like 33 people throughout the country. And I spent the time on the ones that had, that needed obviously needed the help, but the ones that I saw the potential for leadership, I would spend the time. I would give them the extra calls. I would get on meetings with them and explain, how you can improve, what you need to be doing, uh, you know, really trying to push them. And I'm sure I made an impact because a lot of these guys at that company and the next company, they still call me. We're still in touch the same way I still call Cody and Bill, you know.
Now, what's like, okay, say you had to give someone coming into the field like a quick elevator pitch on what's so good about the field and why you want to be in it and what they can do if they want to make a career. What would you tell them?
All right, quick elevator pitch is like I told the guys when I was recruiting them, and I said it earlier. This job is done. The best and worst part of this job is you go home when the job is done. So you're not sitting there waiting on a clock to end. If you can go in there and you can figure out the problem in 2 minutes and you walk out the door 5 minutes later and the job's done, you're going home for the rest of the day. In the field service industry, most of the times the companies don't want to burn you out because a lot of those companies have a high turnover rate. So they try not to work the guys more than 4 to 5 days a week. So you're typically not working 8 hours a day like you are at a day job. You're working, you know, your travel there is part of it, your work is part of it, your travel back is part of it. So if you can find efficiencies and you can finish a job faster, you can be done faster.
But do
So
they pay you by the hour or salary? Like if you're doing this,
so it's
like and you leave
salary
early,
plus.
what happens?
So all right, some companies do pay salary, and those ones typically pay a slightly higher salary, but most companies pay salary plus overtime. So if your salary is good and you're not in a position where you're going to get overtime, right? Like let's say you only had 4 hours on your schedule for that week. I'm sorry, 4 days on your schedule for that week. And if you can go do those, if it takes you 10 hours a day to do those 4 days, then you're working 40 hours. But if you can do them in six, that's 24 hours.
Do you think there's any chance that AI is going to negatively affect the service industry?
I wouldn't say negatively. It's gonna change it. Um, I'm
In what way?
as you know, both of us early adopters of AI, and I use it to find efficiencies at my job. Um, I've even showed you, I think we had a conversation where I took a schematic. I was working with the guy online, like on the phone. He was troubleshooting. He's telling me this fuse, and I'm like, all right, it's probably this. And I circled the item. But then I printed it out another one without it circled. I said, hey, AI, this fuse is blown and this fuse is blown. Tell me what do you think failed? And it circled the same component I did. So yeah, it's gonna find efficiencies. It's gonna improve. I can see a point where maybe in a few years down the line, um, equipment might have built-in AI and just know what's broken, but you're still gonna need a technical person to replace that part, right?
Now, when you say technical person, do you think a scenario would come up where, say, that device is able to determine what is broken? Do you think it's just also going to be able to give you a how-to on the spot so you don't have to have as much technical staff?
Yeah, but I mean, how comfortable are you going to be without training on electricity to you know make that replacement? I mean, some people, if you were looking at a thing for, all right, perfect example. I was working on a, I was working at a bank. This was in Boston many years ago, and it's a string of wet cells. And I'll throw a picture in the description so you guys can, or in the, I'll make it pop up during the post production. So basically, it's a bunch of batteries, and there's big cables going between the batteries. And part of the job is we have to clean those batteries. So I'm up there scrubbing away at these batteries. It's 550 volts, but I'm touching the cable, I'm touching the terminals. The guy's like, "Are you worried you're gonna get shocked?" I'm like, "No, because it's DC. I'm touching one terminal. I'm not creating a path between two positions. So you could touch any point and be safe." But they don't know that, So how comfortable are you going to be replacing that? What if you have to replace one of those batteries? It's a some of those batteries are
Can't they
600
give you like
pounds.
a warnings or disclaimer or thing that they have to be aware of so that way they don't make those mistakes? Like you knew the DC uh technical side because you've done it, but what if they just mention that in the pop-up? Like, hey, this specific terminal is this, you can do XYZ, you can't do XYZ.
Yeah, I mean, they can definitely do that, but it's still going to take someone that's brave enough to do it. It's like you ever see those guys who work on with the helicopter on the high power lines?
Yeah.
They clip the helicopter to the power and then they touch it, and their hands are literally like sparking as they're doing it. Yeah, you could tell me the theory all day. I'm still not doing it. You got to have
But
somebody with the
so
confidence
I
to.
guess what I'm getting at is yes, that person will need to be somewhat competent, but will they need to be as technical? Like if they just know their way around electricity, or if they're in a different sort of field service, will they need to have the same technical knowledge as someone today needs to have?
Probably not, right? It'll probably be a regression. But what's going to happen then? What about when the AI is not working properly? Or what about when it gets the first cause, but it doesn't have enough sensors, so it knows what's broken, but it doesn't know the cause of why it broken. So when that part gets replaced, it just breaks again, and the AI doesn't know why. Now you're going to need that smarter person, or I don't want to say smarter, but the more experienced person who has a bit more in-depth knowledge to continue on getting to the next step of figuring out why this is happening, what else needs to be replaced, what else is going on here.
I guess
So
my thought would be that they would put some kind of an AI module in whatever in your specific field in a UPS or something. They put an AI module in there that would indicate what the failure points are.
right, and that's it's always going to be limited by its number of sensors too, right? So it's just like a PLC, program logic controller. You can have sensors that tell you a various number of things. They all give inputs to the program logic controller. When one of those sensors fails, it throws an alarm. You can plug in, you can say, okay, it's this sensor, it connects to this input module, and then you can trace it back and find that sensor. But did that sensor fail because something was actually bad or because the sensor was just bad? So now you have to troubleshoot a little bit further. So yeah, it's the PLC itself simplified it, but to a certain degree. And now, what about the part where you have to decide, how do I shut this down so that I can replace it without wiping out the customer's load? Or how do I write the paper to convince the customer that it's okay to do X, Y, and Z, and let's do it on a holiday or whatever. Yeah, the AI might have input, but they still want somebody to say, okay, who's going to take liability if we do this wrong, and or convince them to do it right.
Okay. I'm going to hit you with a few last closing questions. And I guess one would be, what's one skill that you picked up in the field that's actually helped you in your personal life outside of work?
Well, picked up a lot of stuff like fixing various electrical devices and flashing firmware and stuff like that I learned. But probably the most unexpected would be just the people skills, right? I've got so many people now that I talk to that are friends that ran facilities that I would visit frequently in the field, and we're like I said, we're still in touch. We still chat. We Whenever we're in town, we try to grab a bite to eat together. Just that ability to network. I've always been chatty, but I was not always as, I guess, good at it. You know, it's one thing to just be chatty, and it's another thing to like engage with people that want to engage with you back and make form bonds. You know.
Okay. And looking back at your whole career so far, what has changed the most in you since those early field days?
Yeah. So in the early field days, I kind of was like one of those guys that just wanted to do the job and was happy to get the paycheck and work a little overtime so I can you know take girls out on nicer dates, I guess. Like I didn't really care. And then with a little bit of mentorship and a little bit of direction, and then the marriage, I kind of got the push, and I wanted to master my craft. And once I mastered my craft, now I wanted to master the next level. Um, so I kind of pushed and got into management, and then now at this point in my career, I want to spread it out. I want to give back to the industry that did so much for me. I want to, I wrote a book, Mastering Field Service Engineering, Critical Power. I'll put the link. I'll throw a poster as well. Great, great for someone getting started in this industry. I'm also on the side. I'm helping people find jobs in this field. I started a little. It's just mainly my wife and using my connections, trying to get people jobs. FA consulting and recruiting. We're just trying to find people who are the right fit for this industry and help them get placed in the right position. And I do this all on the side. I'm still, running the department for the company that hired me, Raptor Power Systems. I got their stuff on. I've had it on the whole time. Good company, great company, good people. Um, but yeah, that's the change in thinking, right? I went from that guy who just wanted to get, go to work and get paid to now like I actually care about this industry. I care about the people. I care about my customers, and I want to see more young people get started down this path and get into this industry because there's so many smart, bright young people who don't even know. They all want to go to these colleges and get these degrees, and everybody wants to be a lawyer, everybody wants to be the same thing, but there's all this whole industry is starving. We need talent, we need people to get in here, and nobody even knows about it. That's why I started the podcast.
And what makes you so enthusiastic about the industry? And do you think that your colleagues are as enthusiastic about it as yourself?
Absolutely. So obviously there's still those naysayers, right? There's the guys who were like I was when I first got out of the Navy, right? They were just happy to have the extra money and a little overtime, and they don't really care about mastering. They don't really care about moving up. But most of the guys that are like senior tech level, the guys who are ambitious, they love this industry because it's all right. If I sell somebody a loan and I make the bank a little bit of money, okay, I made money for me, I made money for the bank, but what did I really do? Yeah, sometimes you're helping people buy something they couldn't afford, but sometimes you're just helping them go into debt. Where here, I show up, I'm the hero,
Well, I
right?
wouldn't say that that's necessarily a fair comparison because there's good and bad in every industry. I would
True,
say that
true.
there could be a field service tech that just fixes a problem that knows they're not fixing a greater problem just to keep getting service calls, you know?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But okay, bad comparison. But to my point though, when I show up, I'm showing up and I'm trying to be the hero, right? This thing is broken. You need me to fix it. You called me because you wanted the help, and I helped you, and I got it done. And it's the same thing like when I bring my car to the auto mechanic when it's making a funky noise. I want it to stop making that noise so my wife will stop busting my chops about it.
So do you
You
think
know,
that the people in field service have the hero mentality when they go into a job, like they want to be the person saving the day?
I think there's a good number of us who do. You know, there's something to be said about accomplishment at work, right? Like, all right, when I go there for maintenance, it's not always the greatest, right? So it's not very glamorous going there and doing a little bit of maintenance. But when something's down and you go out there, you're man on a mission, right? I need to get this thing up. I need to get it fixed for this customer. They're depending on me, and I'm depending on myself to be able to do it. And if we can't get it done, it's just going to be like I'm going to just feel miserable. I'm not going to be able to sleep that night, and I'm going right back the next morning. My whole brain is going to be like, "What is it? It's got to be something. Did I try this? Did I try this?" And then I'll start scribbling things down on the pad until the next morning when I go back and try again. So yeah, it's you have to have that mentality of it's gonna be fixed. I'm gonna do it, and that sense of accomplishment at the end of the day. When you go home, your head's a little higher. You feel good, like I did it. I fixed it. I solved the problem.
Okay. And your jobs, do they typically are they shorter in duration? Have you ever had jobs that lasted months where you had to keep thinking about this problem, banging your head against the wall for 2, 3, 4 weeks, a month?
Not really for problems, but some jobs in particular, like what they call a commissioning. You might have a facility that you have to commission the whole facility, and it just involves so many steps and so many pieces of equipment. So day after day, you're going through and you're going to the next piece of equipment and starting it, and it might have a problem, and you have to fix that one's problem. Then you move on to the next one, and then okay, we got through all the steps for that one for that level, and now we have to do the whole thing for the next level and test every nook and cranny to make sure this system does every single thing that the salesperson said it was going to do, with all tested and proved, and it meets or beats expectations. Those jobs can take months.
Okay, gotcha. And one last question to close this out. When it's all said and done, what kind of legacy do you want to leave behind in this industry?
Um, I want to be I want to be remembered, right? Like most people. So, like I said, I wrote the book on the industry, a book on the industry, and I want to improve it and do a second edition. I also I want to be someone that they would call if there was trouble. By the time I'm at the end of my career, I don't just want to be working for a company. I want to be consulting for multiple companies. I want to be the guy that helps them all achieve it, right? Because there's enough out there that they don't need to be in competition with each other. Everybody's got their little difference, their little niche or niche where they can all help out the greater industry. And I want to be the guy that helps them get there. But it's a slow go from here to there. Just gonna keep doing what I do best every day, and eventually I'll make it to the next tier up.
All right. So we'll leave everyone with that. This has been Field Service Life.
Thanks, buddy. I appreciate you interviewing me.
No problemo. Until next time.
Till next time.
Racing hearts, burning streets where the wild things meet. Fast lane, rebel cries. We're chasing the highs in the dark of night. Our lights collide, electric dreams, we're alive. Down for the day, we're born to roam in the field service life, where the thrill of the chase cuts like a knife. We're born to rise in the fire and the strife. Gasoline veins, adrenaline high, breaking free.